When I look back at the men I chose to love, it's clear now. I wasn't choosing with my heart. I was choosing with my trauma. I was a dismissive, avoidant attachment style woman who had no clue of what a healthy, secured attachment style of loving was. Welcome, my loves, to the Hardened and Healed Podcast.
Hey, loves, I'm home. Hey, loves, come sit on down with me. Thank you so much for welcoming me back into your homes for another episode of the Hardened and Healed Podcast. I'm London, your favorite healologist. Yes, that's a word. Okay, no, it's not. It's my word, so don't Google it. I'm here to help shed light on those who are emotionally traumatized. Yes, from childhood, and it is now wreaking havoc in their adult life. Now, I believe there isn't a person out there that has not experienced some form of childhood trauma. The difference between those who are unhealed and those who are healed is awareness. That's what this whole podcast is about. Now, there are different forms of secured and unsecured attachment style. Throughout childhood, we either form secured or unsecured attachment styles. So if you think you haven't been affected by childhood trauma, keep watching. Oh, wait, where do you think you're going without hitting that subscribe button? And hey, you haven't even taken your attachment style assessment test. That's right, there's an assessment test for you to take, but no worries, it's only 5 minutes. I know you have 5 minutes, just like you have that 1 second to hit that subscribe button. Now, if you haven't seen the previous episodes of the Hardened and Healed Podcast, where I explain what an attachment style test is, you're in luck today. It is basically a specific questionnaire that asks questions to determine whether you are secured emotionally or unsecured. Now, when I say unsecure, I don't mean insecure. There's a difference. Trust me. But knowing your emotional status is very important. Just as important as taking care of your mental health. Now, if you don't know where those tests are, no worries. I'm going to link that in the description box below. I'll put about 4 links there. You can choose one of them. Or hell, you can do them all. They all can't be wrong, right? Once you determine what your attachment style is, please be sure to comment it in the comment section. I would love to know. Okay, so get to testing and good luck. Now that we've gotten through that public service announcement, sorry for the interruption, but I want to make certain that everybody is starting off in the same space, knowing your attachment style. It is so important. I cannot express it enough. Now, what I want to do today is a little bit more different than what I've done on previous episodes. I feel like on previous episodes, I've kind of skimmed the top of the topic and not really go into too much depth. But I realized that if we're going to make an impact on this emotional illness, we have to go deep. We have to. How else are we going to get to the other side? So as your healologist, it is my place to make certain that after you pull back all those layers, you heal and get to the other side. That is the whole goal. So let's talk about where childhood trauma comes from and how early it begins. It begins, as I said before in a previous podcast, it can be as early as in the womb and as late as 7 years old. Now, why such a broad gap? Well, during that time, doctors believe that between fetal and 7 years old, you're developing your core values of who you're going to be. So a lot of the things that you hear in the womb, whether it's a lot of silence or a lot of shouting, whether the person that's carrying you, if they feel loved, you will feel that internally. If they feel scared or terrified or feel those emotions as well. So sometimes you come out as a child already traumatized. Now, if you hadn't experienced any of that in the womb, that is not to say that you don't experience that in early adolescence. Whether it's being dropped off at a daycare with unfamiliar people and having a panic attack as a kid. You know, some of those kids that cry the entire time at the daycare, from the time mom and dad dropped them off until they picked them up, to the kids that know how to self-soothe. Like you put them in a car seat or you put them in a sitter and they don't make a sound. All of these are trauma triggers. Now, again, I know that people don't feel comfortable sometimes with the word trauma because they identify it as being very gory, like sexual or physical. But emotional trauma has a very deep embedded impact because no one is aware of it. So when we're not aware of it, then we don't even know how to fix it. We don't even understand that it is something that is broken, and it's broken emotionally, which is internal. But not for long, because we're on Hurt, Hardened, and Healed. Oh, we're getting to the root of things. So let me start off with myself. I know that I gave a brief synopsis in the intro about my life and about my own personal trauma, but I didn't go deep. So how can I expect you to go deep if I'm not going deep, right? So let's just call this our transparent segment. And I will encourage you that if you would like me to share your transparency on the podcast, let me know. Write me an email and I'll link that in the description bar below. And we can definitely go through your layers. Let's find out who you are and who you've grown to be. Now, very early on, I started off as a dismissive avoidant. Prior to now, I had no clue what that was. I didn't even know that there was a name for it. But I was overly protective of myself. I was overly protective of my space. I was overly protective of my peace. Like, I didn't allow people to get in. And this is very early on. I grew up as the only child to a single mom. Now, my mom and dad were married, but they divorced before I was aware of what a marriage was. I was reared in New York. My dad lived in South Carolina. And so there wasn't you can go over to your dad's house on the weekend, probably for the first 12 years of my life. So that in itself is already a trauma, not having a male figure in my life. I do remember talking to him long distance over the phone. And a lot of times I heard from him when I was being punished. Like my mom would call him and tell him something that I did, and he'd sit on the phone an hour just grilling me basically. So I wasn't even sure if I was fond of him or not. I'm like, this dude only calls when I'm in trouble. Like, what's up with that? But anyhow, believe it or not, those experiences by itself is enough to change who you are as an adult. There's a lot of things that I experienced differently from children that grew up with siblings in the home. First of all, I had no outside or internal support other than my mom. I was a latchkey kid. So if my mom wasn't home, I was by myself. And all through elementary school, I was home to maybe about 6 o'clock in the evening. And then at that time, my mom would come, she'd cook and, prepare and get me ready for bed. But there was a lot of loneliness in that space. Now, some would call that neglect. Some would call it just latchkey parenting. Some would just say, hey, it wasn't that long. It was just something that was necessary at that time. And I get that because I also became that type of mother as well. When I got older and I had my children and became a single mom, they were in the home by themselves. It was a little bit different because they did have one another to lean on. So I'm sure their experiences was different from my own. But it can be a very lonely place as an only child, especially when you spend a lot of time alone. So I learned self-soothing very early. Now, here's the catch with self-soothing. When you self-soothe, that means that you don't rely on others to soothe you. So there were often times where I could see kids acting out or crying about something that I too probably should have been crying about, but I didn't. I had, through the loneliness and through the separation, I had learned to self-soothe. I knew that rolling around and kicking on the floor wasn't going to do anything for me. Now, again, this is early childhood, but this also is now the stair steps to how you respond as an adult when you get older. So things like walking to another room in the dark with no lights on. Not that my mom paid the electric bill, but I'm just saying, like, I wasn't afraid of the dark, or I wasn't afraid of noises. Now, rodents, that's a whole nother conversation. But when you're in New York, I mean, hey, you can't have New York without having rats. It just is what it is. But a lot of the fears that I probably should have had, I did not have because I only had me. So that also changed my mom's parenting style. Because it was solely me, I feel like she reared me to be a lot more tougher. She prepared me to know how to handle myself in her absence. Which is crazy because we're talking about 5, 6, 7 years old, and you know how to do a lot of things that maybe an 11 or a 12-year-old would be doing. Maybe around 8 or 9, I started traveling on the subway by myself. So I would travel from the Bronx to Manhattan, to and from. I would leave on a Friday. I'd call my mom once I got off the subway, got to a payphone, and I'd call and say, hey, I'm here. Technically, I wasn't there yet. I had another maybe 6 blocks before I get to my cousin's house, who might have didn't have a phone. So there was no way for me to really concretely tell my mom that I made it to their house. She would just have to trust that I did. Then on Sunday, when it was time for me to come back home, I knew I had to leave, of course, before the street lights come on. So I know I'm telling my age, but I would come back and I would hit that same payphone to let her know I'm on my way home. At that time, there were 2 different subways that I could take, the number 2 or the number 5. And I will tell you the distance from where I actually live was crazy. One was super far, but that train came more often. The one that was closest to my home took maybe about an hour, hour and a half, just to get a regular route. So in that time, I learned not to talk to strangers. I learned not I learned to pay attention to my surroundings. I learned not to make a whole lot of eye contact, but just stay focused on where you're going. I also learned to keep my money in my shoe. My mom used to always say, walk on your money. And if you know about New York, pickpocketing is real. It's insane how those people, how crafty they are. But all of this is now preparing me for adulthood, even in my childhood. When I went to elementary school, it was right across the street from the building that I stayed in. So there wasn't a whole lot of travel there, but I definitely had to be able to speak up for myself, defend myself, not be bullied. And I felt like that is where I established a lot of coping mechanisms and also how to negotiate, right? When you're by yourself, you start developing tools that you need to survive. So this was really like survival, to be honest. Fast forward around middle school, I moved to the South. I moved and stayed with my dad for a little while until my mom came. Her dad had passed and she decided that she did not want to raise her only daughter at that time in New York without a male figure or male role model in our lives. So we moved to the South where my dad was, and that relationship was immediately estranged. Immediately. I think I had the Cosby Show all mixed up in my head, and I really thought like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go there and my dad's going to carry me around like on his hip and it's going to be great. He's going to throw me up in the air and all this stuff. Never mind the fact that this is now middle school age. But a girl wants what a girl wants. So I had always imagined that that's what it would have been like if he was in my life. And when I used to talk to him over the phone, I didn't understand distance at the time in elementary school. So I never understood why he couldn't just drive or catch the bus or catch the train and come see me. So when I moved to the South and I stayed with him and his wife at the time, I became very close to her. One, she was very motherly. She was also pregnant with my brother at the time. So for her, I was just like this big daughter that she never had. We were not that far off in age. Put it like this. She wasn't old enough to be my mother, but she wasn't like underage. I'll say that. Most of my experience there was with her, not my dad. So we didn't bond the way that I thought that we would. I didn't have that father-daughter experience that I wished I would. I would say what I thought or expected deteriorated really quickly. And that was super disappointing. Even just the culture of things. There were a lot of things that my mom thought for me to have that were like trendy or just kind of what the kids want, what the kids do. And my dad was just kind of like, what you talking about? So I immediately stuck out like a sore thumb. Here I am in the South, this thick New York accent. I look and dress differently from everybody else. And then I have a dad who's kind of like country style. And he is trying to, I don't know, recreate me. I don't even know the words for it. But I remember him bringing me a bag from the Salvation Army. And he said, pick some stuff out of there. Pick whatever you want. Whatever you want, you can have. And I was thinking, it's clothes in a trash bag. Now, this might sound very simple for some people, but for me, this was a traumatic experience because you're asking me something I had never experienced before to go into this bag and take out clothes that belong to other people. Adults, let me say that. So I was always tall. I'm 5'8". I was super slender. So I was as tall as a average adult back then. I probably was like maybe
5'4", 5'5", but I couldn't wrap my brain around it. It's like, why would I be putting on their clothes? But that's what he gave me, and I chose not to select anything out of it. Some might say I was being ungrateful, or I didn't realize maybe the need or the reason he did that. Maybe he had no other choice. I don't know. But for me, it was devastating because now I'm outgrowing the clothes that I kind of moved there with. And my mom's in New York. I'm under his supervision. And he's trying to have me out here in these streets looking crazy. I'm already the target at school. Oh, we're not even going to talk about my hair. So it's so crazy because I'm a licensed cosmetologist, almost 30 years now. But I used to love doing hair before I moved to the South and stayed with my dad. But I thank God for whatever skills I had. Because, listen, before no edges became a thing, I was about to be edgeless. My stepmom didn't have any really hair skills. They sent me to like the hair school once or twice. They left relaxer on my edges. 3 days later, they're still burning. 5 days later, they're blistering. I finally, wet it, and I realize I'm oozing, I'm scabbing. Oh yeah, these are traumatic experiences. I don't care what nobody say. Nobody's going to test my trauma. I know what it is. Now, these are more of the more lighter note, I'm just going to say, because there's probably a lot of people who can relate to these type of things. But even in parenting, we as parents end up going from one end of the spectrum to the other. We either get our kids all the things that we never had, or we raise them like we were, to have basically nothing. And I think that both of those can be traumatic experiences. You feel like, oh, the only child that experiences trauma is a child that was in lack, didn't have food, didn't have shelter, didn't have clothes, things that I sought. But sometimes a child that has too much of it can create its own type of trauma that ends up plaguing them a little later on in life. So when I say childhood trauma, it's even the things that we think are good that can cause negative repercussions. So fast forward, my mom came. I wasn't with my dad quite a year, maybe about 6 months. My mom came, and there was a crazy dynamic between her and my dad. I think he wanted her back. I'm not certain. I think him and my stepmom was a little bit rocky. So there was a lot going on, and he kind of felt like I was creating this wedge between him and my mom. So I had the burden of that because I was thinking, my mom already said she doesn't want you back. But for some reason, he felt like I was trying to prevent that from happening. So I had kind of the burden of feeling like my parents could get back together, but I'm the cause. Even though I knew that I wasn't, but it is what it is. Eventually, I just kind of shook that off and said, hey, you had her the first time, right? So that was your moment and opportunity and time. I mean, y'all were married, so something didn't work. But this also brings me to the importance of marriage. Now, I had always understood marriage to be the way to go. Like, that's what you do. You find your mate, you get married, you have children, partridge in a pear tree. However, that didn't happen like that for me. So even though I knew that in the back of my mind, this is how it goes, the experiences that I've had growing up through childhood are creating a different type of personality for me. Here walks in this dismissive avoidant personality. So when you are a dismissive avoidant, there's a lot of things you can't do. Not that you don't want to, but you literally cannot do. I feel for people who are dismissive avoidants only because I can relate, and I understand the agony of wanting to love and let love in and being terrified of it. Now, you don't tell yourself that you're scared. What you tell yourself is you don't have time for that. You're not about to let anybody play you. You're not about to let anybody take advantage of you. And so you develop this hard shell. Because for me, in childhood, I was already self-sufficient. I was already
doing things differently from most children my age as far as responsibility. So when it came to now dating, I didn't see the necessity in that, right? I liked the idea of having a boyfriend, but I didn't have an actual desire. When I lived in New York, I had several cousins who were like aunties to me. And though I kept seeing babies pop up, nobody really maintains a relationship, at least not marriage. So you see the babies, but you don't really see the husbands. So then you start to question, is a man necessary other than for making babies? You don't openly say that, but honestly, your behavior reflects that. And so a lot of times we have behaviors that we don't verbally say, but our actions speaks volumes. It expresses exactly what we're thinking, even subconsciously. And that's crazy, but it's really, really true. So when I began dating seriously for the first time, I ran into an anxious style attachment. And for me, that anxious style attachment was a lot. Now, if you have taken the assessment test or even read the other characteristics, you could see how diabolical this union is. I was 15 going on 16, and I was probably a tomboy, to say the least. Now, I had been going out to teen clubs and partying and stuff like that, and all that stuff. I did all that, but when it came to guys, it was a little awkward for me. Like, don't put your arm around me. I don't want to hold your hand. I don't want you telling me what to do or where I can go or what I can put on. There was a need for independence and not being controlled, not being led. And that makes actually sense for a 15, 16-year-old, because you shouldn't be being controlled by somebody of the opposite sex a year or two older than you. And at that time, the person that I was with was about 2 years older than me. So he fell in love super quick. Did I say super quick? Super quick. Like, after maybe a month or so, he was on the phone saying, I love you, and I'm not going to hang up until you say I love you back. And I struggled with things like that. I was just like, why do we have to do this? And so I realized that I started trying to play along. I never emotionally attached. And it was because he was coming in hot. You know what I mean? Like, it was overkill. But I didn't know his attachment style. I didn't even understand my very own. So everything that mattered to him pushed me away. The clinginess, the cuddling, the blowing up my phone, the wanting to be where I am all day long and wanting to know what I was doing was driving me insane. And this is as a teen. But here it is, I'm surrounded by friends who are idolizing this. And they're like, what is wrong with you? This man loves the ground that you walk on. He will do anything for you. He will get on his knees and cry and beg if he had to. And you sitting here whistling Dixie like unbothered. And I appreciated the depth of love that he had for me. But now, in understanding his attachment style, that love was never about me. That was about his own trauma, his own abandonment issues and rejection. And it's crazy to think that I could sense that even as a teen. I knew that the love that he was expressing was unhealthy. As an anxious attachment style person, that love can be very toxic and controlling and manipulative, because they are trying to fill a void with you. And for them, it's by any means necessary. So I just felt like, oh my gosh, like suffocating. And all I wanted to do was just be free. I wanted to hang out, be a teenager, and have a good time. That was it. And that made him cringe, because that made me more available. That made it possible for other guys to take interest in me and me likewise. But had he understood my attachment style and all that it took for him to get me, he would have known that I would have not easily went with any other guy. I was struggling trying to maintain a loving relationship with him where was another guy going to come into the equation? It didn't help that he was also my first. So I think that when I talk to some guys, I used to work in a barbershop years ago, and it's so funny. Not a lot of the guys there hadn't necessarily been with a virgin, but those who did said that it definitely triggered them differently. Now I can't tell you, why. I only know what they said. So guys, if y'all care to say why y'all feel differently about a girlfriend that's a virgin and you take her virginity, hey, please drop it in the comment section. I'd like to hear why that is. But my attachment style and his attachment style just could not work. But we tried. And when it became unhealthy to the point of threats of suicide, I knew that it was time to go. And I don't take that very lightly. I realize that there's a lot of red flags when you get to that extent. And in hindsight, I can look back and see all of them clear as day. But the anxious style person sometimes seems so unstable that you feel bad for abandoning them, right? You know that what they are offering is unhealthy to the relationship and even to themselves. But because you love them and you care, you just try to make it right. I don't know. And then, being a teenager, you kind of like selfish, you know what I mean? So I had a lot of friends, I could honestly say, that were very extremely selfless in their relationships. Like, we could be getting ready to go somewhere and their boyfriend called, they're not going. Me? I'll see you when I get back. And if you got a problem with that, we're probably going to break up. So there was a lot of breaking up that went on in that relationship, which drove him even more crazy. So I would say that when I look back now at the childhood trauma or experiences, let's just say that to make it on a lighter note, I could see how him coming in felt like he was going to restrict or remove my independence, something that I had established probably since about the age of 4. I remember when I was 4 years old, I had an older cousin, kind of old enough, not quite old enough to be my mom's mom, but to be like an auntie to my mom. And she came to New York with some friends, and she decided to take me back with her down south for the summer. Now, I didn't know this lady at that time from a can of paint, but I remember being 4 years old, and I remember my mom packing my things, wishing me off, and expecting me to have a great time. And I remember thinking, why? But at that time, I wasn't one of the kids, like I said, that fell out and cried, and I self-soothed, right? So I realized, I looked at my mom's face, I said, this looks like what she wants, and I don't want to disappoint her. I've always been about impressing my mom, making my mom proud. So crying in this moment and embarrassing her, even as a 4-year-old, I understood the impact of that. And so I didn't. I took my little suitcase, I got in the car, and I remember being in the back seat trying not to cry. The average 4-year-old would be hollering, kicking and screaming. I was internally, but even then I was suppressing emotions. I don't even know that I knew how. As much as I wanted to, I didn't. And I remember hoping that they don't notice the tears falling from my eyes, and I would wipe them quickly. And when they would say something to me, I would respond and I would smile. But inside, I was grieving, leaving my mom. So I went for the summer. It was definitely a culture shock when I came down south. A lot happened during that visit. I think that was the first time that I kind of saw my dad at an age where I was old enough to remember. There was a lot of tug of war with him wanting me to stay with him, and my other relative who came and got me, she's like, I went and got her, so I'm keeping her. So there was a lot of push and pull with that. But that experience probably was the first of many of me being emotionally detached. And then other experiences soon followed. And so as an adult, I became difficult to love, not because I was mean or I was harsh, but because I was disconnected. I did not know or probably even want to respond on an emotional level. I think that I did, but I identified that with trauma. Like I identified that with pain. I didn't see the good that could come out of falling deeply in love, even though I thought that I could. Now I thought that I could, and I thought just the right person hadn't come along. I didn't realize that without doing the work and counseling, the right person would have never arrived, even if they did, if you know what I mean. So, being a dismissive avoidant has definitely plagued a lot of my adulthood life. Decision making, choices, things of that sort. And what's so crazy is like, I don't even know how I attracted an anxious style person, because I feel like my type is their worst nightmare. But it's so crazy because I think that if I dated an attachment style or was married to an anxious attachment style person, because I am in a healthy emotional state, I would know how to handle them. I would understand their needs. I would be able to set certain boundaries and be able to negotiate. Like I told you, I learned very early on. A lot of me salvaging that relationship with that anxious style person was negotiation, right? It was either I was negotiating or I was cutting it off. So that's probably more like an ultimatum. Like, hey, listen, either you're going to be okay with this or we're not going to be together. Yeah, that's probably more of an ultimatum. But hey, I mean, you live and you learn. So I'm not going to talk your ear off. I'm going to go ahead and conclude part 1 of my journey as a dismissive avoidant. If there are any dismissive avoidants out there, drop it in the comment section. Let's chat. Let's talk. Tell me about the experiences that you had and how they have helped or hindered your adulthood and what you're doing to get to that healed side. We can't just stay there. We can't just leave it there. There's room for us to grow. And that's what we're going to do. Well, loves, there you have it. Another episode of the Hardened and Healed Podcast. So as your healologist, I am prescribing for all my dismissive avoidants out there a moment to decompress. Be okay letting somebody in. Prescription number 1. Be okay having help. Prescription number 2. Be okay being loved and loving. And then, of course, the last 3 prescriptions. Like this video, comment on this video, and subscribe. That's the biggest prescription of them all. Subscribe. So I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here until y'all welcome me into y'all homes again. So until next week, you be healed. Bye, loves. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of the Hardened Healed Podcast, go ahead and subscribe, share with a friend, and turn on your notification button so that you don't miss an episode.